Hey everybody, welcome back to the series. Thanks for bearing with me for a couple of weeks as I work through some professional projects. Got some learning in that I have been falling behind on and dealt with some personal issues as well. But I'm ready to come back to this farmers market series, and today we're going to build a landing page. So this is what we currently have here on the left side in our application. It got us to the point or got us to the vendor page, which is all we needed the landing page to do in the initial phase, was get us to the vendor page. But now we're at the point in our application where we want to start to visit the markets, see products that are available to us from the perspective of a customer, put those in our shopping basket and purchase them, and then we'll be able to return back to the vendor side and see those orders and fulfill them. So a pretty exciting divergence here on the application. This is what we're going to build here on the right side. So we've got an iOS version, we've got an Android version. Not too much platform specific logic going on here other than the app bar up at the top. We've got a large title collapsing nav bar for iOS. We have a collapsing nav bar here in material as well, but with the materials style. Everything down here is roughly the same. So we're going to build a container for a button to take us to the vendor page. So we can still go to the vendor page, which we would want to do. This vendor page badge would disappear if the person who is logged in is not a vendor, but for now we're just going to have a vendor pop-up icon there. The customer would just see nothing there if they weren't a vendor. We're going to have a stack up top, which allowed me to put this vendor button anywhere I wanted. It would also allow us flexibility to put in notification bells or menu options. We also have an app bar. We could do this as a trailing item on our nav bar. So we've got all kinds of options on this landing page. And then down below, we've got a list here. I've got a basket, and the idea being that, farmers markets are not like Amazon. You can't just go on there anytime. But as a farmers market or a date draws near, orders would open up, and that would be signified by the basket, or maybe something a little bit better at grabbing attention than the basket. But some of these would be live, some of these would just be for future information, and as soon as they're accepting orders, you get a basket or whatever icon we decide to do there. You can click on them, go into the market. This down at the bottom, this is a list tile, a material list tile for both. So I'm going to use a trick to use a material widget inside of a Cupertino widget, which I've been keeping up my sleeve this entire time. So how's that for a teaser? All right, so that's enough talk. Let's go ahead and get started coding. Okay, so I'm going to start on an Android device, and I will switch to an iOS device at the end just to make sure everything's working. But you can start with either one of them. Will be fine. So let's start in our landing page, which is in our, let me shrink some of these up here. I don't need iOS. That's in our screens folder, and it's landing.dart. So this contains the code for what we see here on the screen. And we have an app button here, and it goes to /vendor root. So I'm just going to take this out. We don't need this. All right, so I'm fine with the column. I'm fine with this main axis alignment. But what I'd like to do is divide this screen into two portions, and I would like the list view portion at the bottom, which lists our upcoming market, to be slightly bigger than the top portion with the picture and our stack, which has some items that we can kind of space around the screen. So I'm going to start with a flexible widget. And I'm going to give it a child. I'm just going to start with a placeholder, and I'm going to give it a flex of 2. So I'm going to have the top portion be 40% of the screen and the bottom portion be 60% of the screen. And so I can do that with a flex 2 there. And then down here, I can do another placeholder. And when I go to do my flex, if I want this to be 60%, I can do a 3 here. All right, so the flex doesn't really matter, except the ratio is the only thing that matters. So doing 2 and 3 is the same thing as doing 6 Or if I wanted to be really transparent about it, I could do, well, actually, that's probably the most transparent because that's out of 10. So it's basically 40% and 60%. So, but I'm just going to set this back to 2 and 3. So for the top, I want to have an image up there. And so I'm just going to go to pixabay.com, pixabay.com. If you have somewhere else you like to get royalty-free images, or you have an image, go for it. I am just going to look at, let's just do farmer's market. And I'm just going to look for something that I think represents a farmer's market in my area. That one looks pretty good. I like the tomatoes and the flowers. Let's do this one, because it actually looks an awful lot like that placeholder image that I have in the card. And so I'm going to do a download, and I'm just going to download the smallest size possible because that's really all I need. Then I'll just go to my Finder, and I'm going to drag it into my Assets folder, and I want to put it inside the images. So this is going to be an asset image there. And if you have a picture you think represents, or you could just do the same search I did, I'm going to rename it market.jpeg. And now I got something that can go up top. And so I'm going to put that, I'm going to go bounce back to landing here. And for my flexible here, I am going to do, instead of a child here, I am going to do, or instead of the placeholder, we're going to do image.asset, and then we're going to give it an address of assets/images/market.jpg. All right, and so there we go on that part. And down below is where I want to list my markets. So I'm going to take the placeholder out, and I'm going to put in a list view because I know that's what I want. Now, ultimately, we will probably want to have the list of markets in Firebase and have that controlled by the market administrator. But for now, we're just going to pre-fill some widgets with just some hard-coded data just to kind of take up the space on the screen. So I need a list tile in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, just as we've done on several occasions, I'm going to go to the widgets folder, and I'm going to create my own version of what I want a list tile to look like. So I'll go into widgets, and I'll create underscore list tile, list tile.dart. And I'm going to make a stateless widget here, and I'm going to call that app list tile just to differentiate it from the actual list tile in the Flutter library, the material library. Let's import the package for Flutter material just to get the stateless widget functionality in there. Now, that's why sometimes I use a stateless or a stateful widget in this widget folder, and sometimes, like in the case of the scaffold here, sometimes I use an abstract class. And I really didn't give a whole lot of thought into why I was doing it, but I did apparently have some method to my madness when I was asked this question. The stateless widgets are things like list tiles and text boxes and elements that I want to be able to put on the screen and be cross-platform. The sliver scaffold and nav bars, things like that, those are widgets too, because everything's a widget. But I really like the option of being able to specifically see on the page that I am calling for a Cupertino page scaffold and a material page scaffold. And so by doing an abstract class, I can do, app sliver scaffold dot Cupertino page scaffold. And it just, to me, makes my code more readable to have the abstract class option for things that are pretty high level, like the scaffold. Everything else, I'm fine with it being a widget and just having one name for it and knowing that it adapts in the background. All right, so for our list tile in here, I want to really make use of a list tile. So I am going to return a list tile. Let me first get rid of that wrapping container. I don't want that. And the list tile is part of the material library, but boy, it is awfully handy to have. And I find that the results are pretty similar to what you see on an iOS device. I don't feel like the material list tiles are necessarily platform specific, as long as you don't take it too far down the material style. So I think we can do one for both. And that's what I'm going to try to do here. So first of all, for the leading, I'm going to start with a circle avatar. And what we'll do for the avatar is we will put the month and the date inside of it. So I'm going to give it a background color of appcolors.lightblue. Let's bring that in. Light blue. And you know what? Let's go ahead and actually visit our landing page, and let's put one of these on the screen. So we can do an app list tile, and then we can just start to see it on our screen as we build it. All right, so if I go back to app list tile, I can see I have got a light blue background. And for the child, what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to have the date of the farmer's market here, like a 4, if it's the 15th of the month of 15, whatever. And then the month also, but the month can be kind of tiny. So what I'll do is I'll do a column, and we'll do children in that. And I'd like to move that to the next line. It's just the way I like to see that. And so we'll do a text widget that has the month. So I'm just going to put October as a placeholder there. And then we'll do another text holder that has the date, which I'm just going to put a 4 in there for now. And we'll save that. And we can see that doesn't look too hot. And so what I'll do is I'll add a style here to the month. And I could do, there's some pre-configured text styles we have, but this one's going to be pretty unique because it's going to be pretty small. So let's do a text style, and let's add a color of colors.white, and a font size that's fairly small. So let's do 12. All right, and then for the actual date, we'll go a little larger on this. In fact, let's do the button style here. So we'll do a style, and then we'll bring in our text styles, and let's do button text light, like that. Okay, so this is still coming a little bit out of the circle, and we can fix that by just making the circle avatar a little bigger. So circle avatar has a radius property. Let's do 25. All right. And then we are, that looks like a good size, but we could definitely bring this column into the middle by adding a main axis alignment here for the column. And we'll just make main axis alignment center. All right, so that looks pretty good in our list tile here. Let's see, that is our leading. So let's come down below the leading and let's add a title. And that will be a text that says the market title. And let's give that a style as well. And let's try our text styles. Let's try title. Oop, that's going to be too big. Let's try our subtitle then. That's pretty good. I like the style of the font there. It gives a little contrast. And I like the color as well. And so then let's do a subtitle. And for that, let's do the market location. So if the market moves around, or you've got multiple markets listed here, or just maybe it's just nice to have the information there. Anyway, 1 Main Street, Anytown, Vermont. All right, now we're talking. And I'm going to leave the default style there for the list tile. It's just another nice thing that the list tile introduces, is that kind of soft gray color that gives you the impression that the title is the important part and the subtitle is also good information that you might want to have. And then we had a trailing there on my my mock-up that was an icon. And I decided to go with Font Awesome icons for this one because they had a better shopping basket than the specific Cupertino and material. And let's give that a color. So let's go color, we'll do app colors. So we're picking from our palette, and we'll do dark blue. All right, so it's looking pretty good. I think I will just add a second one there just so we can get an idea of what they look like as far as their spacing. So I'm just going to landing.dart and just adding a second one. And I can see that they're a little close to each other. I also would like a little separation between these two. So in our list tile.dart, let's do, instead of returning a list tile directly, let's return a column which includes a list tile and then a divider below it. So we can wrap the list tile with a column, and then we can come below the list tile and just add in a divider, which we'll get whenever we call our app list tile. So let's do our app colors. Let's do the light gray. Yeah, and that creates some separation. What I don't like is that this is going the full width of the phone, and so we can certainly fix that by adding in some padding. So let's wrap that with padding. And for our padding, let's do edge insets. And I kind of like the spacing here. I don't necessarily want to introduce any more on the top. And we have a list padding item that adds to the sides, but it also adds to the top and bottom. And we don't necessarily want to do that. I just want to add from side to side. And so let's do symmetric and let's do horizontal. And in our base styles, if we bring that in, all right, like that. We have our list padding, but we also individually did the horizontal and vertical padding if we ever wanted to reference just the one. So I'm just going to reference the horizontal, and you got to look very carefully, but if you look really closely, you can see that that line no longer extends all the way. It extends basically to the end of the list tile. All right, good. So now I'm realizing that those of you who chose iOS may be very annoyed with me right now, because you're probably getting an error right here because you're trying to use a material widget in a Cupertino scaffold. And if you look at the documentation under list tile, in fact, I think you can get it right here, requires one of its ancestors to be a material widget. So this as is on an iOS device will not work. Now, the way we've gotten around that in the past is we have said if platform.isIOS, I'm not going to import it, but do this and else do that. And this would be our else here. This would be our material. And we could come up to the top here and we could create a container and we could space it all out to look roughly equivalent to this. And we really could have gone for a cross-platform look from the start and not use list tile. But list tile is so convenient and it's such a time saver that I hate to build our own there. But it does present a problem for us in iOS. But we can fix that pretty easily. So if we go back to landing here, let's address, we've got our page body here. Let's address our scaffolds here. All right, so in the first place, what I want to do with the page body in iOS is I want to wrap this with a widget, and I am going to wrap this with a Cupertino scaffold. And I'm going to replace child with body, of course. And so now this portion, or this screen around here, has a material scaffold, and that's fine because everything that we've done within here, we've made more or less cross-platform. We have used a material list tile, but it doesn't look any more Android, I think, than any other element. And so in that case, we can go ahead and use the scaffold as a container, and it doesn't really affect our page. If we end up wanting to use something on this page that is specific to iOS and looks entirely different from iOS, then we would need to revisit this decision and actually build a separate list tile that is made out of a container and doesn't rely on a material scaffold. But as of now, my plan is that's not really going to matter much to us. So I'm going to go ahead and just wrap that in a scaffold like that. And so while we're up here, why don't we also replace our Cupertino page scaffold and our scaffold here and mix in an app bar. So for the Cupertino, let's start with, let's do an app sliver scaffold. That is one of our abstract classes that we have that returns a scaffold for us. And we want to specify Cupertino sliver scaffold. And there are specific properties that we've created that go into this. And one of them is our page body. And another is a nav title. So that's we've created the nav bar inside of this abstract class, and we've created a Cupertino flavor for it. And all we need to pass in is the nav title. And then down here in the material portion, we want an app sliver scaffold as well. We're going to reference the same class, but we're going to request a material sliver scaffold. And we pass a page body, and we're going to pass a nav title. All right, so that gives us a sliver, and if we scroll up, it collapses just like we would want it to do. All right, so also while we're still here, let's take care of restoring the button that gets us back to the vendor page. And so what I want to do is just kind of float a roundish looking container right here that allows us to create a link for the vendor page. And so inside the stack, or inside the flex widget, what I'd like to do is create a stack. And so for my child, let's go ahead and put a stack there. And let's put children in that stack. And then I'm just going to put back my image. So I'll do image.asset. If you were smart enough to cut it and keep it, you could paste it back in here, but I'm just going to retype it. Like that. Let's see, I need a new comma there. That should restore everything that I had before. And now I have a stack so I can come on top of the image with a container. And the container will have a child, which will be a text widget. And it's going to say vendor page. And let's go ahead and add some style there to that. Let's do style, and let's do text styles.button. Oop, I need to import that. Let's do button text light. Oop. All right, we'll save that. I don't see anything yet, so let's wrap this with a widget. And let's put in a positioned element. And we can tell this exactly where we want it to be in the stack. So this is the stack here. It begins below the app bar. It ends here where we have the list tile. And what I want to do is come 10 pixels up from the bottom and then 10 pixels from the left. And the child is going to be this container. So let me format that a little bit. Right, and I'm still not seeing anything. So let's add some color to that container and see if that is our problem, because we do have white text and it might actually be sitting right there in the white. If that doesn't fix it, I'll have to investigate what's wrong with it. So in the container, we can add a decoration property, and that can be a box decoration. And let's start with a color. So we'll do app colors. Let's do light blue on that one. And let's do, I should be seeing it at this point, so let me figure out what I did wrong here. All right, so this looks a little crappy here, so let's do some things to it to fix the appearance. So let's take this text here and let's wrap it in some padding. And let's try 8. That looks not bad. So the next thing I want to do is just kind of round off the corners here for our container. So in our box decoration here, let's look at our border. Let's go border radius, and let's do border radius dot circular. And for a radius, let's tap into our base styles. So import that. And let's do our border radius. So we've got a standard property that we're using for that. That gives it a little bit of roundness, and that looks pretty good. All right, so that's going to be a button for us, and it's not now. So let's wrap our container again, and we'll wrap it with a widget, and we'll just put a gesture detector there. That's the way we can turn anything into a button. And so we'll give it an on-tap method, and in the on-tap, we'll do an anonymous function. So empty parentheses, arrow function, and we'll do navigator.of_context .pushNamed, and our route is /vendor. So let's just check and make sure we can still get to our vendor page, and we are back there. Good. All right, I see a circular progress indicator that is funky on one of those pages, but we're not going to worry about that for now. We'll just mentally remember that and circle back to it. All right, so this looks pretty good. The only problem we have here is that we have hard-coded the information in our list tile. So the last thing we need to do is just make sure that our custom widget for a list tile accepts information into the widget. So let's create some variables up at the top here. And so we will create a final string, which is month, a final string, which will be date, final string, which will be our title, a final string, which will be our location. And lastly, we'll create a final boolean, which we will call accepting orders. And so when I showed you the prototype at the beginning, we had a shopping basket on one and not on the others, to mean that that one is open and ready to start accepting pre-orders for that particular market. So we'll create a boolean that we can pass that in. And so we'll do a constructor, and we want to require most of these. So we'll do @required . And since I can't seem to type that. I'm going to copy and paste it and do this dot month. And then I can just do Control V and this dot date, Control V, this dot title, and Control V for required, this dot location. And the accepting orders I am not going to require. So what I'm going to say is this dot accepting orders equals false. So if you pass nothing in, that's going to be false. And if you pass in a value, then it will, of course, accept it. Let's get a semicolon there. And let's just come down and replace everything that we need to replace. So I've got a hard-coded October here. That should be month. I've got a hard-coded 4 here. That should be date. I've got this hard-coded the market title. Let's replace that with our title variable, and our location is in our subtitle. And then we have this shopping basket, which we want to only display if the market, that date, is accepting orders. So let's just do accepting orders like that. And if it's true, we'll pass that. And if it's not, I'm just going to pass through a text with a blank string in it. All right, so that should break our landing page. So let's go back to landing.dart, and where we have our app list tile, I'm gonna move these down again. Let's go ahead and hit Control Space. It's gonna give me a date. I'm gonna say 4. I'm gonna pass it a month, and I'm just gonna say October. And then the next property was title. And I'm going to say Anytown Farmers. I'm going to hit a backslash so I can escape the apostrophe. Market. And then lastly, I'm just going to hit Control Space and see, okay, location is 1 Main Street, Anytown, US. And the last option I have, if I hit Control Space, I can say accepting orders. I will say true. And I am going to, that there, I'm going to just copy this down. So I'm going to hit Option Shift down on my Mac, and we'll create a few of these. So we'll do here, we'll do the 14th, the 20th, and the 24th. Why not? All of October. Anytown Farmers Market. We could say they're all at the location. That's fine. But I'm actually going to I'm going to say we're only accepting orders for the next farmers market at this point. And these are just going to be informational listings. So you won't be able to click on them. All right. And I save that. And here's what we got. So we've got a collapsible bar up here. We can scroll, and I'm just going to go a couple more here. You don't have to do this, but I just want to make sure that we can scroll up and down the list, which we can, which is fine. The only thing I find kind of annoying here, and just the last thing we'll do before we leave this, is this space up here, and it's actually even worse on the iOS device. And this is because when you have a column, you get a safe area up there, and you really can't do much about it. So if you have a list view, you could take this picture and it would go right up to the top. It would go around the notch on an iOS, but the column space starts below the notch and below this informational bar. It's supposed to start below the informational bar. Actually goes a little bit into it here. And I want to fix that because I've got an image up at the top that I don't necessarily care about. I want that to take up all the space all the way to the top. And so let's do that. So before I do that, I'm going to switch to iOS just to make sure everything's working there, and then we'll do that. So I'll be right back. All right, so back up here on this iOS device, scrolling's working okay. I can still go to the vendor page. That's all good. And so the last thing that was bothering me, you can see this scrolls up here and we get our collapsing nav bar. This just doesn't go to the top, and I'd rather have this image go up and just all the way to the top. And like I said, the column won't do that. There are some tricks we could employ. We could refactor this page to a list view or a stack, but that's a lot of work. So what we'll do for a simple trick is we'll go into our landing screens. So screens, landing, and we have our stack. We have a positioned widget here as our vendor. we have the image, and what we can do is wrap that with a widget and make that positioned itself. And so we'll have a child. Let me see if I can wrap that here. And the solution that we're going to use will be very familiar if you've ever worked in CSS and just used negative margins to get yourself out of a hole. We will just create a top margin that is a negative value. So I'm just going to do -10. That should be enough to kind of get it up off the screen. And let's see, maybe I could go less. Let's try like 8. And we're still there, so that's pretty good. And so now it goes all the way to the top, and so we don't have that little gap there on the screen. If you still have a gap on Android, go ahead and bump that up to 10. In fact, I tested it at 10. Why don't I just leave it at 10? There we go, like that. All right, so that is our landing page. We can get to the vendor page here. In the next episode, I would like to start to activate this link here in the list tile so that we will go to a new page with tabs and navigation. That is our market. And so it will have products. It will have the ability to pay, everything that you would expect to do. You can add items to your shopping basket, everything you would expect to do as a customer in the market. And so we will work on that next time. So thanks for continuing to watch this series. Really appreciate it. And we will see you then.